Hi, everyone. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Roger Philipp of Roger CPA Review. Roger is actually the founder of Roger CPA Review, which is one of the most popular review courses out in the market today. Roger, thanks so much for taking time from your busy schedule to come speak to both myself and my students today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, some of my students may not be aware of this, but I actually had the pleasure of taking Roger's review course many years ago, back in the early 2000s. Back then, he actually started his review course just by himself. He was pretty much a one-man show. He had to kill himself driving. I remember driving around. He was telling us he drove around to various locations in Northern California. I think he may have even flown to Southern California. Just a one-man show, flying around, teaching, marketing, and still he had the energy to do an amazing job. So, I have to say he played a really big part in me personally being able to pass the CPA exam. So fast forward today, Roger, you're now delivering your lectures via online format, via video stream. And yeah, it's just changed quite a bit, but the quality obviously is still very good. So back then, I just to tell my students, I actually shopped around. I was planning to shop around at various review courses, but I just remember I saw Roger had an ad saying that he would let us sit in one of his on-ground classes for half a day to thoroughly let us see if we really jive with his lecture style. So I went in, I didn't know what I was getting into. So I sat in one of his lectures. I think there were probably, it was like 50 or 100 students in some sort of hotel auditorium, but I sat there and I really enjoyed his lecturing style, because he was funny, engaging. I mean, that really makes a big difference when you're working long hours. He kept me awake. But most importantly, he was just a really great instructor. I mean, Roger, amazing. I remember, you thoroughly covered the material. You taught us mnemonics to help us remember. There's just a lot of content to memorize. You taught us mnemonics, and you were really clear in your delivery. So, I mean, that really helped, because all that stuff you learn in college, it just leaks out of your head. So you really helped us refresh and also retain that knowledge. And the other thing was, what I really appreciate about you was back then when you taught us on ground, you were really transparent. You really took the time to open up to us and share with us, your background story. Let us get to really know you as a person. So I think today in the online format, granted it's more convenient, but I think your students don't really have the unique don't have that opportunity to get to know the real Roger, Roger Philipp, and how you were, you grew your business organically to make it into what it is today, and how you really put time and effort into everything that you do. So the whole point of today's interview is to offer, my students this unique opportunity to get to really know you, and then obviously your review course.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I'm very proud of you and your success. I mean, you took my course many years ago, and since then you've done amazingly well, and you're now influencing hundreds and thousands of future accountants and CPAs to be. So thank you for adding to the profession.
Well, great. Well, let's get started. So my first question to you, Roger, is could you briefly share with my students a little bit about your background and your work experiences?
Sure. Well, I grew up in LA, and I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I went to Cal State Northridge, and that's where I got my degree. I then worked at Deloitte and Touche. I got there and I worked in the enterprise department. So I wanted to get a combination of audit and tax, because you never know where you're going to end up in life. So I started in audit, and then I would drift into a tax pool. So when back then we had a busy season and a slow season. Now it kind of seems like it's always busy, but I drifted into the tax pool, and that way I could get a little bit of experience both in audit and in tax. And then there was a group called the Enterprise Group. Then I left there after about 3 years, and I started teaching CPA review for one of my old college professors, who I would always see him at Meet the Firms, and he says, "What are you doing? Come work for me." I'm like, no. So then after several years, I'm like, you know what? I love public accounting, and it's great for some people, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't my fit. And I said, you know what? This isn't my purpose in life. This isn't my passion. And I think in life, it's important to find your passion, because, life is short, and it's even shorter if you love what you're doing. If you want it to feel like a long life, find something you don't enjoy. But I then left, started teaching, and I loved it. And so I started teaching for a guy named Mark Doberman, who had the biggest CPA review course in California, and it was growing and growing. And I worked there. I think I started in about 1988. I don't want to admit it. I was 3 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Started teaching there, and I picked up audit, and then I picked up business law, or BEC, added FAR, added reg, then I taught everything. And so that's kind of how I got into CPA review. So it was an exciting time. And I worked there for about 13 years.
Well, great. That kind of that's gonna lead us to our next question is, as I mentioned many years ago, I took many now it's many years ago, I
Yes.
took your review course, and when you first started your business, it was all on ground, and you had to fly and drive around to different locations to teach us in person. Would
Yes.
you mind sharing with us like what happened after your Mark Doberman when you actually started your business? How did you grow it into a major force that it is today?
Yes. Well, I was working with Mark, and people had said, "Oh, you should start your own review course," and I was very loyal. At that time, a competitor offered to purchase my boss's company, and they realized, you know what, it would be less expensive to just put them out of business. So they cut their price in half, and all of a sudden, from one day to the next, my paycheck bounced. That was on a Thursday. My boss went bankrupt on a Monday. I felt sorry for myself and went drinking on Tuesday. On Friday, I formed my own corporation. I started teaching classes Saturday, Sunday. So I basically sent out an email and said, hey, look, I'm up in San Francisco. I still have a place in LA. I'll probably go back and live there. But if you want me to help you, because it was in February, and this was back when the exam was twice a year, May and November, 3 days in May, 3 days in November. And it used to be a 19-and-a-half-hour, 3-day exam. You had to sit for all 4 parts, pass 2 parts in order to keep anything. Now it's a 16-hour exam with each part being 4 hours. You can take one part at a time. So I basically said, look, pay me $50. I'll pay my rent for the next 3 months, get you through the exam, move back to LA and figure out my life. So I did that, and I think I had like 75 kids in each class. And I remember the first day someone says, how do we know you're not going to go bankrupt? I said, look around the room, my overhead's low, I'll get you through the exam. So that's what happened. But then everyone was like so just positive and said, we'd love to take your course. I have friends that want to take your course. So I said, okay. So I started writing materials. So I would write materials Monday through Friday. Plus I would do marketing on campus to say, hey, Roger CPA Reviews is a new company. We're going to be here. And on Friday night, my girlfriend, who's now my wife and mother of 3 kids, my kids, then Friday night, we had to throw that in. Friday night, we'd go to Kinko's and Xerox my material and hand them out to the students. So on Saturday, Sunday, I taught. Monday through Friday, I was on campus handing out flyers, doing class visits, sitting in the student union, writing material. And I would do that in between. So it was a crazy amount of work. So I did that to create the materials. Then I opened up San Francisco, San Jose. Then I opened up LA and Orange County. Then we opened up the East Coast. And then thank goodness the internet was created. And so what would happen is I would film I do like filming like the olden days. I'd film my classes. Then, and actually my stepdaughter was the first one, my videographer, she was great. Then I would take the tape home, and I had 25 VCRs in my living room. For those that don't know, video recording, the VCR cassettes. Used to, you could rent them at Blockbuster. Where are they? Bye. So I would get up every 3.5 hours, and I would pop 25 videos in to make copies. That's how I had to make copies. Then, thank goodness, we had hard drives and flash drives and mobile, and now it's all online. Now, when we had flash drives, we could recopy them in 10 minutes. Back then, it took me real time, 99 hours to make a whole course. So it was pretty crazy back in the day, but it was really rewarding. And then we just kept growing and growing. So, and then in 2012 is when I closed my last live location, because the internet, everyone said, I want to study when I want to study. And so the key was, can I take that energy from what you had, the live class, and present it online? And I think, we're now so used to it that just took off like crazy. And I always tell people it'll be like the most exciting, dynamic TV show you've ever watched. That's my job, to make it exciting. And now we're globally, we're in all 50 states, we're in Japan, we're in the Middle East, we're all over the place. So it's been really great. And then fast forward to today, we just merged with a company called UWorld. And what's nice about joining forces with UWorld is they're a huge company that does online education, great for college prep and USMLE, MCAT, SAT, ACT, AP classes. But they're obsessed with high quality content. They're investing millions of dollars taking our great product, but taking the content, the solutions, and make them like diagrams and detailed information. So you're really learning a lot just by looking at those solutions. So I'm really excited for the future about how the product's going to just keep evolving and improving.
My next question is, so there are many review courses out there, obviously, to choose from. what makes Roger CPA Review a great choice?
I think it's the quality of the product, the approach, the active learning. You know, I try to be high energy and motivating and entertaining, but I want students to, you know, if you're sitting there watching a lecture, it's kind of like in college. If you have an exciting, motivating professor, you like the topic, you learn more, you're excited, you're focused. If you're bored in class, you're not going to study. So if you're watching my lectures and I'm not inspiring and motivating, then you're not going to open the book and you're not going to do the homework. So I try to create things like mnemonics and memory aids that really, you know, you probably still remember them back from the day
I
because they
do.
stick
I
in your
do.
head, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
TTPPO 75% or 90. I still
Yes, yes,
remember.
for leases, right. You know, now we
Yeah.
have a finance lease or an operating lease, is a title transfer, bargain purchase, lease term greater than 75%. No, exactly. And those memory aids and mnemonics work. And I have students that graduate, get jobs, work in big four, national, local, public, private, government. And they all say, I still remember you mnemonics and I use them at work. And what's cool about all of you accounting majors, this is one of the few majors where you actually use the stuff you're studying in school in the real world. I mean, there's so many majors where you never use it again. Here you do, so it really makes it great. Also, as I said, with the UWorld merger, we are investing so much in content and the quality of the content. So we're bringing that in. So what differentiates us, I think, is the motivating style, the content that we're spending a lot of time on. We have a deal with, for example, McGraw-Hill, who does a lot of college professor textbooks. They love our product. They use our questions for FAR, audit, tax, and so on. So it shows the credibility of the product. As I mentioned, that smart path. Also, we have a fully featured app. What that says, and that, you know, in my day, we had a book and a teacher and a white, you know, a chalkboard. Now what we've got is an app where you can do it on your phone, on your computer, on your iPad, whatever, and you can do audio, you can make your own flashcards, you can do the multiple choice, the task-based simulations, all of that kind of stuff. And as far as staying up on content, we meet with the AICPA 2 to 3 times a year. I fly to New York, I fly wherever, and we meet with them, and they, you know, they want to make sure the market's growing and the exam is reasonable and fair. So they share with us the changes. We talk about the upcoming changes, FASB's, TCJA, Tax Cut Job Act, and so on. So we get the information and also when it's eligible for testing. That way I can go back and we can edit our content, edit our videos, edit the software. So everything, no matter when you take our course, boom, whatever you need is exactly what you need. It's current, it's updated for your product. And that's why one of the things I tell students, because now we offer unconditional lifetime access, is I tell students, look, get the course while you're in college because you can study it to help you in school and help you to get better grades, and it never expires, so you can use it, you know, when you actually get out in the real world and need to study for the exam. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
So the last question I wanted to ask you was, you know, when I took your review course, you know, back then it was all on ground. So you were nice enough to let myself and other students sit into half a lecture, kind of sample your lecture style to see if we jive with you, which obviously many of us do. So now your review course is offered online. So do you guys do you have an opportunity for let people sample a little bit about your product to see if it's a right fit for them?
Totally. Yeah, you know, try before you buy. We have a 7-day free trial. So if you go to our website, you can go there and you can watch the lectures, you can try practice tests, you can make digital flashcards. So you really get hands-on experience with what the product is like. You can also go to YouTube. I have a lot of students who, you know, before their midterms, probably coming up soon, they'll go and they'll watch some of my lectures. And I always say that, you know, professors have a difficult job. You've got to distinguish between an A and a C student. Our job is to teach you how to pass a standardized exam. And so that's why these memory aids, mnemonics, will really help them while they're in school and eventually when they take the exam. And then as I said earlier about our unconditional free repeat, which is great. So that way, once you do sign up, you have that course forever. But I also encourage people to go to our website because it has great information on it. You know, how to get started as a CPA, about the exam itself, the content, the 4 parts of the exam, the application requirements, because everybody asks us that. Also, in case you're not going to stay in beautiful California, which we love, you want to go to another state, it'll talk about the licensure requirements in all the different states and jurisdictions if you want to leave California, scheduling, career opportunities, and again, as I mentioned, that free trial. So all of that is located on our website.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Roger, hey, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And I hope after hearing what you said, students will take the time to check out your website, look over some of your videos, and hopefully consider taking a review course, because I'm sure if they do, they're going to successfully pass the CPA exam.
Right. And you'll have fun while you're doing it, right? So that's the main thing. And like I said, getting a CPA certificate is a great thing. It's something you have for the rest of your life. It gives you that credibility. I always say that I worked so hard getting my CPA. When I die, I'm going to put it on my tombstone. Here lies Roger Philipp, CPA, fully depreciated, right?
Well, hey, I look forward to chatting with you more in the future. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and good luck.